In 1928, a mountaineer camps in India's Karakoram range. A mysterious glowing object appears outside his camp, and he decides to investigate, only to discover a giant light ball covered in a thin layer of ice. After staring in awe for a moment, the man tries to hit it with his pickaxe, which causes him to fall and faint as the sphere grows brighter. When he wakes up moments later, the sphere has vanished, and he bears an unusual scar on his body. Years pass, and it's now 2008. Helen, an astrobiologist, teaches at Princeton University before returning home to her stepson Jacob. Helen still cares deeply for the boy, despite the fact that he has been distant since his father died. Helen receives an unexpected phone call from an unknown person informing her that a car is on its way to her. At this point, the police have surrounded the house, and an FBI agent knocks on the door, informing Helen that she must accompany them immediately. He refuses to explain anything, and Helen does not want to leave Jacob alone. However, a neighbor arrives to investigate, allowing Helen to leave Jacob with her. Helen is driven away, but the FBI agents still refuse to answer her questions. They eventually arrive at an airfield, where Helen boards a helicopter with scientists from various fields, including a nuclear physicist and a civil engineer. All of these scientists, including Helen, were taken from their homes without explanation. Moments later, the group arrives at the Linwood Military Academy in New Jersey, where the military asks everyone to leave their cell phones at the entrance. Helen acts quickly, concealing her phone beneath her clothes before being apprehended by her old friend Michael, who has put Helen on the vital list due to her work with a famous doctor named Carl. Michael then gathers all of the scientists in a room to give a presentation on the current situation. An unidentified space object is approaching Earth on an unusual trajectory, and preliminary calculations indicate that it will collide with the planet. Because its incredible speed makes it impossible to shoot down, the government has decided to form an emergency response team to deal with the fallout from this disaster. The team has only a little over an hour before the cosmic object collides with Manhattan. Helen locks herself in the bathroom after the meeting, intending to call Jacob and tell him to hide in the basement, but she does not tell him anything. One of the soldiers overhears her conversation, but rather than arresting her, she requests to borrow the phone so she can call her family. After that, the scientists travel to the location where the object will collide and quickly become concerned because the object cannot be identified and the rocket launch system is disabled. Terrified, they hold hands and count down the last seconds, but nothing happens. Through the window, they see a bright ball of light slowly approaching Earth and landing in the middle of Central Park, causing people to flee in terror. The scientists quickly put on protective suits and cautiously approach the glowing sphere, sensing something in the air, possibly electromagnetic waves. Soon, police and military personnel arrive with weapons and surround the area, at which point a bright light shines on the sphere, revealing an alien creature greeting them. Helen slowly approaches the alien, who extends his hand to her. However, when she tries to reach back, a shot is fired, and the alien falls into her arms, bleeding heavily. Suddenly, a massive creature appears out of nowhere and uses its abilities to turn off the power to the area and disable all machinery. It also makes a terrible ultrasonic noise that shocks everyone's ears. The creature then reaches for the injured alien, but the alien stops it with a simple gesture, and the robot shuts down, allowing the machinery to resume normal operations. After that, the injured alien is taken to a military lab. Helen advises them to get a surgeon to remove the bullet. The surgeon creates an incision and easily removes the bullet. He also notices that the gray skin-like tissue on the alien's body is cracking and peeling away, so he removes it all. To everyone's surprise, the remaining creature looks very human. The alien is then placed in a specially designed protective capsule where his condition is monitored. Helen speaks to him in a friendly tone and assures him that there is no danger, and the alien relaxes when it is revealed that he resembles the mountaineer from 1928. For the time being, he simply repeats Helen's words rather than answering questions. Meanwhile, humanity is in a state of chaos and panic. Stock exchanges are closing, and New York residents are preparing for an emergency evacuation, fearing an alien invasion, while the president and vice president seek refuge in a shelter. Regina, the Secretary of Defense, calls an emergency meeting and discovers that aliens have hacked into one of the spy satellites, gaining access to all classified information about national defense. To make matters worse, more of these glowing spheres are falling throughout the world. Regina arrives at the lab and hears the scientists' findings. The aliens' flesh samples contain DNA from 3 different life forms. The creature's body tissues are human, and its gray flesh shell is organic, similar to a placental protective suit. It appears that the aliens had previously visited Earth and obtained a sample of human DNA, which explains the mountaineer's scar in the alien's ability to assume human form. Afterward, the group visits the alien, who speaks perfect English, and Regina attempts to interrogate him, but her questions are ignored. Helen then asks him to tell her about himself, and the alien identifies himself as Katu, claiming to represent a group of civilizations. He requests a special meeting with the UN so he can speak with all of the world's leaders, but Regina refuses. Regina orders that Katu be injected with truth serum and taken to a safer location for interrogation. The scientists believe Katu is the most important discovery in human history and do not wish to hand him over to the Secret Service. But Regina believes this alien poses a significant threat to humanity. Michael and Regina argue, only to be interrupted by Helen, who assures them that she will personally inject the alien and conduct all required tests. Helen is then given a vial of truth serum, but she sneaks into the pharmacy and steals an additional vial of regular saline. Meanwhile, Regina informs Katu that he will be relocated to a more secure facility. When Katu expresses a desire to leave, Regina informs him that he is not permitted to do so because he illegally invaded the planet and attacked the military with his massive robot. Katu emphasizes that the biorobot is only activated in the presence of violence and directs Helen to administer the injection. Helen gives him saline instead of truth serum and tells him he needs to run. Helen is immediately taken away, and Katu is bound to a chair before being led to a room equipped with a lie detector, where an agent asks him a series of control questions and monitors his readings on a screen. Katu only gives a few ambiguous responses before using his power to reprogram the lie detector and electrocute the agent. Then Katu takes over the man's mind. Katu uses his abilities to gain control of the security cameras before quietly exiting the building. In the midst of the chaos, Helen steals a sample of the alien's flesh, prompting Regina to use all of her resources to apprehend the fugitive. Katu eventually arrives at the train station, which is also completely disorganized due to canceled departures. Katu takes advantage of this opportunity to observe social behavior. He becomes ill and rushes to the bathroom, where he realizes he is bleeding and passes out. Helen receives a call at her home seconds later, informing her that a patient has requested her assistance at the station. Helen immediately drives to the station to pick up the alien. Then she drives Katu to her car, where he encounters Jacob, who is being rude. Katu asks Helen for a sample of the gray tissue that was removed from him, which he applies to his wound to heal it instantly. She follows the route that Katu has requested. When the trio arrives at their destination, while Jacob goes to the bathroom, Katu inquires about Helen's family. The boy's father was a military engineer, and his mother died in childbirth. Helen married Jacob's father, but he also died, so Jacob is now under her care. The trio then enters a fast food restaurant, where Katu meets Mr. Wu, another alien in human form, who was sent to Earth 70 years ago to study humanity. Mr. Wu explains that he has found humans to be destructive, stubborn, and resistant to change, and Katu concurs. So he tells Mr. Wu to leave because he intends to continue with the operation. Mr. Wu, on the other hand, plans to stay on Earth because during his research, he saw both the good and the bad, and now that he has his own family, he wants to spend his final moments with them. Meanwhile, the military surrounds the inactive giant biorobot with super strong protective panels, hoping to neutralize its abilities. Returning to the trio, they are now heading to New Jersey. When they arrive in the woods, Katu requests that the car be stopped before driving away. Katu returns from the forest and requests that Helen take him back to the city, but Helen refuses until she receives an explanation. Katu informs her that humanity is destroying the Earth, and because there are few planets in the universe where complex biological organisms can live, Katu has come to save Earth from the humans, believing that if the human infestation is eradicated, the planet will be reborn. Helen is outraged and tries to persuade Katu that humans can change and should be given another chance. But Katu refuses to believe her because they have been watching humanity for years and no change has occurred. The situation has reached a critical point. Furthermore, the process has already begun and cannot be changed. Helen is still convinced that Katu has the power to stop everything he wants, so she suggests taking Katu to a man who can persuade him otherwise. Meanwhile, the secret services are investigating the various spheres that have left Earth. They discover, via video footage, that the glowing orbs are transporting various Earth creatures into space. Regina notices that the spheres are arcs, similar to Noah's, implying that a flood is imminent. While the military confines the biorobot in a deep underground silo, riots and looting erupt around the globe. Helen returns and takes Katu to see Carl, a Nobel Prize-winning scientist with whom she previously worked. When Katu discovers a formula on a board and decides to correct it, Carl jumps in to help him finish the problem. This leads Carl to believe that Katu is the wanted alien. In another room, Jacob is watching television and notices the hotline number to call if anyone sees Katu. Carl wonders in the living room how Katu's civilization survived, to which Katu responds that their son began to die, forcing them to evolve. Carl points out that this is an example of change occurring when a being is on the verge of extinction, and that humans, who are currently at that point, should be given more time. This gives Katu a lot to think about, but their conversation is cut short by the appearance of Air Force helicopters. Katu, Helen, and Jacob rush out of Carl's home. The trio tries to hide from the military in the woods, but Jacob emerges into an open clearing and starts shouting and waving his arms to attract the attention of the helicopters, before admitting to Helen that he called them because that is what his father would have done. Helen, devastated, tries to remind him that his father is no longer with him, but this only causes the boy to cry. Suddenly, one of the helicopters catches Helen and takes off. The other two helicopters see Katu and prepare to fire, but Katu uses his powers to stun the pilots, causing the helicopters to crash. A terrified Jacob flees into the woods, but Katu quickly tracks him down and saves him from falling into the river. Then Katu convinces the child to follow him. Helen later confronts Regina and asks her to let go, explaining that Katu listens to her and that only she has the ability to stop him, but Regina refuses. Meanwhile, special forces are testing the massive biorobot on the military base. They attempt to penetrate its armor, but the diamond drill breaks. While the technician grabs another one, strange insects multiply rapidly and consume the drill. Suddenly, the massive robot disintegrates into tiny little particles, which turn out to be bug-like nanorobots that start devouring everything around them. As the windows crack, some of the men want to flee, but the base is sealed, so they must wait. Everyone is quickly reduced to dust as the base is totally destroyed. The military informs Regina of the situation, explaining that the nanorobots are unstoppable and that now that they've broken free, they've formed a massive cloud that travels in all directions and destroys everything it comes across. When insects reach a large stadium, they can be reduced to dust in seconds. Regina realizes there is nothing they can do and releases Helen to speak with Katu. Michael will accompany her. Katu takes Jacob to a woodsman's cabin in the forest and lets him call Helen on her cell phone. After agreeing on a safe meeting location, Jacob and Katu begin their journey out, and Jacob admits that he no longer wants Katu to die. This prompts Katu to reconsider his beliefs about the nature of humanity. Moments later, they arrive at Jacob's father's burial site, where he begs Katu to use his resurrecting power as he did with the patrolman. However, Katu's abilities are limited, and he cannot save a rotten body. Jacob, furious, orders Katu to leave, but Helen appears and rushes to the boy, hugging and comforting him. Jacob finally accepts his father's death, and he and Helen apologize to each other for their recent behavior, promising to be a proper family going forward. Seeing such an emotional moment convinces Katu that humanity has a bright side and deserves a second chance. To do so, they must transform themselves and their way of life. And when Helen promises that they will, Katu observes the nanorobots and vows to stop them. The cloud of nanorobots is rapidly engulfing New York City, destroying everything in its path, including people, buildings, and vehicles. Regina speaks with the President of the United States, explaining that they are attempting to resolve this through peaceful negotiations. However, the President is desperate and tells her to resume military operations. Helen, Jacob, Katu, and Michael have rushed back to New York. The streets are empty except for the military, who are blocking the roads, but Katu forces Michael to drive right through them. The soldiers initially pursue them, but are quickly told to back off. Seconds later, the group arrives at Central Park and is surprised to see that all of the military and scientists have dispersed. At that point, the Air Force begins bombing the area as ordered by the President, causing the car to flip and crash as a massive fire engulfs the park. Unfortunately, Michael dies, but the others survive. Katu takes Jacob and Helen outside with the goal of reaching the sphere. However, the bug cloud has already engulfed the globe and obscured the sky, forcing the trio to flee and seek refuge beneath a bridge. Jacob's nose suddenly starts bleeding, and he passes out as Helen's nose also begins to bleed. Katu explains that they are dying because the bugs are gradually eating them from within. Helen begs for his help. The alien grabs their hands and uses his abilities to extract the bugs, absorbing them into his own body instead. As Jacob awakens, Katu confirms Carl's point. Humans can change when they are on the verge of extinction. After saying his goodbyes to the family, Katu walks outside and slowly pushes his way through the cloud of nanorobots until he reaches the sphere. Then he touches the glowing orb, which not only disintegrates his body, but also destroys all of the nanobots, scattering dead bugs across the planet. All technology fails, and cities are plunged into darkness as humanity bears the consequences of their actions on Earth. Helen and Jacob emerge to watch the glowing sphere leave their planet, with Jacob implying that Katu's essence is still inside.